Hi, boys and girls. It's good to see you today. Thanks for joining me for reading. We are going to be working on a new standard starting today. We'll work on it for the next week or so. Today, the important part is that we recall some of the vocabulary words that we've talked about in the past, and then I'll introduce you to some new vocabulary words too. So, our standard for third grade says that you guys can read two books that are written by the same author and have the same or similar characters in them. And as you read, you can determine who the characters are, what the setting is, the plot, and you can talk about the theme. So there's a whole lot involved in this standard. So let's go ahead and get started and review some of these words that were important when we talk about plot. So in front of you, you're going to see a plot diagram. You have heard me refer to it before as plot mountain. We talked about plot mountain a lot when we read Dog Breath. So let's take a peek. We know that at the beginning of a story, we have what's called an exposition. And in the exposition of a story, we learn who the characters are. We learn the setting. And remember, the setting is made up of two things, the time and the place. And we learn some of the background information that helps us understand the problem. So exposition really has those three things in it: characters, setting, and all the background information to really understand a problem. As soon as we learn the problem hits where the exposition and rising action come together. So right here we have what's called rising action. Rising action starts at the problem and hits all the way to the climax. Now, rising action is the longest part of our story. When I draw this chart, I usually draw this a little bit longer and then the falling action a little bit shorter. But for our purposes today, rising action takes up the most part of the story. It's all of those events that lead us to the climax or the turning point. So after we've gone through our rising action, we know that we also have the climax. The climax is also called the turning point. There's no going back at that point. This is usually the most exciting part of the story. We've talked about in the past, this is the part when you're sitting in a movie theater and you have to go to the bathroom and you really, really, really don't want to leave your seat because the movie just got so good. That's usually your climax. After we reach our climax, we have what's called falling action. And falling action is how our characters are starting to solve the problem. You really see how it's going to work out. The author is starting to tie up loose ends of smaller problems that happened within the rising action. And then finally, we have what's called resolution. And resolution is when the author wraps everything up. The problem is solved. There's no loose ends. We know how everything comes together. This is our basic plot. In second grade, you talked a lot about beginning, middle, and end. And if I were to put that on our chart, I would say that this is our beginning. This is our middle. And this is our end, if that helps you kind of visualize where we are at in a story. Something that is a little bit new, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about theme. We talked about theme, one of the very first standards of the year, back in October. So I'm going to refresh your memory on that too. So when we talk about the theme, I'm going to kind of break this into a meaningful word for you. A theme is simply a message that the author has for us. So we can talk about the author's purpose in this, but the author wants to entertain you, but they often have a message for you too. So sometimes it's a message about friendship. Sometimes it's a message about love or respect of others. It just depends on the type of story. One way I remember what the word theme means, if I look at the word theme, I'm going to break apart the word the. Do you see how it says T-H-E, the? And then I'm going to go ahead and add to this the message. So the theme is basically the message that the author has for us. I usually look for it in what a character might learn. So if I think back to some of the lessons that Rump learned in the story, he learned a lot about friendship and trusting others, especially when it came to Red. So I would say one of the themes in the book Rump would be friendship. Another word pair that we need to be reminded of is the word compare and contrast. I'm going to write those down here. The word compare means to tell how something is alike. So I'm going to write the word alike. And our standard also asks us to talk about how things are different or to contrast them. So I'm going to go ahead and write the word contrast. And that means different. So once again, this week, you need to be really familiar with these words. So today you're going to end up practicing some vocabulary words on Spelling City for your assignment. But you're going to see all of these words. You're going to see theme, exposition, rising action, climax, resolution, falling action, compare, contrast, because these are all words we have to understand to really get into our standard. If you need to rewatch our video to be reminded of some of these things, please do so. But then you're going to go to Spelling City and complete your vocabulary assignment today. Have a good day, ladies and gentlemen.